Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Monday. I hope you guys all had an amazing weekend, but I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how it went for me day trading wise today, so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. But real quick, before I do start, I do want to apologize that my brother and I have not been posting very consistently anymore on this channel. We've just been a lot more busy with work in the mornings, and it gives us a lot less time to trade, right? But, just bear with us. I promise you guys we're going to continue to try to post for you guys, and we really love to trade, so we're definitely going to continue to do it. And whenever we can, we're going to try to show up for you guys and try to, provide some value. But we'll go ahead and jump right into the breakdown. As you guys can see on my screen, it was a red day overall on my account, right down $100, mostly because of the fact that Tesla did take, a nice little dip on the day. But as far as how I did day trading wise, I did only trade one thing, ticker symbol TQQQ, and I walked away with $131 profit, right? So I was up 1.3% on the day, given I traded with 10K. So I did exceed my 1% daily goal, and I am super happy for that. But I honestly think I made a lot of mistakes, careless mistakes that would have had me end even more green on the day. So I'm excited to share with you guys, those lessons so that you guys can learn from it as well. But, as far as what I thought or what I saw going on, right, and what made me want to focus on ticker symbol TQQQ is on the larger time frames, right? Pretty much when the market was opening, we were right around this general area. And so why was I focusing on TQQQ? Well, I thought that, given in the past, anytime it does validate a form of support, right? Anytime we do approach those general areas, we do tend to bounce again, right? As we've seen, around these general areas where it established the support. And once it does break below the support and eventually finds a new one, as you guys can see, right, that new support acted as a support in the future, right? And then now that we did break below that support, right, we ended up establishing a new support right around this area, right? And so given during pre-market session, right, we were selling off, and right at market open is where we were testing this previous support level. It made sense to me why there was a possibility that this thing could potentially bounce the way it has in the past, right, where it validates a support. And so obviously it didn't have to do that, right? If this thing broke below and continued to sell off, I probably would have, started to go with the flow and get into SQQQ. But because of the fact that I saw this thing was no longer selling off, right, it was struggling to sell off and instead was starting to reverse and change direction, that's why I ultimately decided to focus on TQQQ, right? So as you guys can see, market open, this thing fell, right? I ended up buying in with a quarter around this area, right? I was buying in with 25% of my position size just because of the fact that we were approaching those support levels like I mentioned, and we could have seen a bounce, right? This thing ended up, going according to plan. It would bounce, right? And we did have a few pullbacks along the way, but ultimately, as you guys can see, this thing really just ripped on the day. The bulls were out, right? And anyone who was trying to predict the reversal would have gotten wrecked on the day, right? Most likely. And so that's why I wanted to, focus on TQQQ, and I didn't see any point in trying to get into SQQQ for a quick scalp, right? When if I thought that this thing was gonna change direction around here and validate that support, it wouldn't have been in my best interest to try to predict when this thing would, pull on back, right? I don't want to be the one that predicts where this thing is gonna reverse. I just want to go with the flow, right? And so once I saw this thing continue to push up, where did I make my mistakes, right? Let me go ahead and share with you guys where I thought I made my mistakes. But in a general note, as this thing would push up, as you can see, right, this thing would continuously form new highs, and around these areas I was just too impatient, and I would fully send a position as it would make a new high. But as you guys can see, there were red candles along the way, right? So there would be times today where I'd fully send it just because the candle formed a new high, only for this thing to pull on back, right, pretty aggressively and correct itself. So I would go from being in the green, quite nicely, to end up giving it all back in one trade. Then I would get back in, and then I would give it back. So even just looking at my trades, you guys can see, right, that at some point, I think in the beginning I was doing a good job of staying a little patient, but where I went wrong, right, 64 orders, that's a little much. Then I would have definitely liked to, trade today. But as you guys can see, right, where I think I went wrong is when I pretty much started to buy a bit impulsively and would just size up, very quickly without necessarily it there being the best setup, right? As you guys can see, I would buy, sell, right? And it would be very quick, right? I'd be in and out within less than a minute. So I wasn't even giving it time to play out necessarily, right? Then I would buy literally a minute after, and then sell, right, for a loss, right? So you guys are seeing I would buy, sell for a loss, buy, sell for a loss, buy, sell for a loss, right? So I was being very trigger happy around this time here, as you guys can see, right? I would just be buying in, then selling, buying in, then selling. And so it was definitely very impulsive because, I personally felt like I was missing out on the trade and I should have, been in. But in reality, I got to slow things down and realize that's where you end up giving back all the profit you made, right? And so I did end up having a few nice trades to end it, right? That last trade, as you guys can see, I was patient with it. I held on to it for about, 15 minutes, and it did end up, I was able to sell it for a nice profit. And so that was the last trade that, put me green on the day. But, this is what I mean, right? As I mentioned, this thing had red candles on the way up, right? So although it was pushing up nicely, there were red candles, and I would be sizing in at a new candle only for this thing to pull on back. And then I would cut losses, and then I'd see it start to pick back up. And then once it made a new high, I would size back in only for this thing to pull on back, right? And so in my opinion, what I can do better in the future is try not, necessarily to size in when this thing is showing signs of it struggling, right? So maybe on the first time it starts to make a new high and I size in and it pulls on back and I cut losses, right? That's fine. But once it starts to, continue to push up, there's no need to just be trigger happy, pushing, buy, only for this thing to, have these corrections in price. If I saw this thing was having these corrections in price and wasn't just climbing, with nonstop green candles, why am I sizing in at new highs when it can potentially pull on back? I think it would have made more sense once this thing pushed up, right, to lock in and size down. And once it pulls on back and breaks below the EMA, tries to test it as a support, right? And once we do see that support and signs of higher highs and higher lows, that's when you want to really step on the gas, right? When this thing pulls on back. So as you guys can see, right, this thing pushed on up, pulled on back, broke below the EMA line, right? But only briefly. So during the pre-market session, we would break above the EMA only for a brief moment, right? We wouldn't be able to hold too long, and then we would make new lows. And so what I was looking out for was the exact opposite, right? I wanted this thing to now start to push above the EMA, and anytime it broke below it, it would really struggle to try to stay below the EMA, right? So exact opposite of what we saw in pre-market, right? This thing would push up, not hold very long, make a new low. Push up, not hold very long, make a new low. Push up, not hold very long, make a new low. But now I want to see the opposite, right? I want to see this thing push up, pull on back to the EMA, struggle, to sell off when it does break below, and then form new highs. That's what I mean by higher highs and higher lows. And so once I do see indications of that, that would probably be a better indication to size up, right? Rather than sizing up at new highs when this thing was already struggling with candles, right? Because as you guys can see, it's the moments when this thing pulls on back, breaks below the EMA, and starts to validate it as a support that it really rips here, right? The money can be made on these rips here rather than trying to be, predict exactly when this thing's gonna pop and be hopeful, right? If I see this thing struggling, why am I sizing up here? It doesn't make any sense, right? But on these nice pushes, when it finally validates that support, that's when I really want to step on the gas. As you guys can see, right? It pretty much just did that all day. Anytime it broke below, it would push on up, make a new high. Broke below, push on up, make a new high. Broke below the EMA, pushed on up, made new highs. And so that's exactly what I mean when I say higher highs and higher lows, right? And the more practice you get in the market, you're gonna start to really see that for yourself, and it just makes trading a lot easier. I could have so seen my old self get in, try to predicting where SQQQ was gonna potentially reverse, right? I would have been wrecked on the day trying to predict if or when it would end up pulling on back and correcting itself. It's just better to just go with the flow. Why am I fighting direction, trying to predict? No one knows when this thing's gonna, hit the top, right? So you may as well just continue going with the trend until the trend's no longer there, right? So you could have continued going with this trend of getting into SQQQ, and as soon as it no longer validates this pattern where every time it breaks above the EMA, it sells off and makes a new low, and instead now it breaks above or breaks below the EMA and makes a new high, that's a pretty good indication that the trend's not there anymore. So why would you want to be in the trade any longer, right? And so I didn't want to overcomplicate it. The patterns were there, and I did end up, selling out. I believe what time here at 7:38, right? So I was really only trading for about an hour today, and 7:38 would have been around this area that I did lock it in. Why did I lock it in around here? Well, there was a previous resistance during the pre-market session. Am I going to be someone who tries to be hopeful and just say YOLO it, and in case this thing were to break above the resistance, it could continue to climb? Or am I just going to be smart, right? Realize that there was a rejection before and it can act as a resistance yet again, right? And so let's lock in profits there. It just makes sense, and try not to overcomplicate it. But I do look forward to trading the rest of the week and seeing how it goes. I'm just gonna try to take it easy tomorrow. Hopefully, if I do have a red day, I'm able to manage it, right? But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with you guys today. Thank you guys so much for tuning on in, as I mentioned, and thank you guys for having patience with me and my brother. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. I hope you guys all enjoyed your day, and I will see you guys in the next recap. Thank you guys. Take care and have an amazing rest of your day.